Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday. Philippa's doing things with the technology, and I don't know what they are. So I'm just going to keep looking at you at different places and smiling and hope it goes well. I don't know which way to look. Anyway, we might be live on YouTube this evening. I am just waiting to let the ladies up here onto the Instagram. Cat should be coming. Let's get Philippa up here too. Oh, what's it doing?
Hello.
Oh, there it is. There's one of you.
Oh, hang on, I'm a bit foggy. I'm a bit foggy. Hang on,
You're a bit foggy. It's a little bit Jack the Ripper, your end.
Hello. I am in East London, to be fair. That's better.
I am in East London. Well, that would explain it. Yes.
Yeah.
So here we are again.
Double screens.
There's double screens.
Right.
I know. I don't know what to do with myself, ladies. I don't know where to look. I'll keep staring at me on Instagram and I'll look at Philippa on YouTube.
I'm really hoping the text works. So I think
it says live to me.
Yeah.
It
Had
says live.
is on. Intrepid Friday Cat is watching us on YouTube. So
hello.
Woo.
So we're also gonna be desperately figuring out how to respond to comments across two platforms. So
it's going to be fun. Just watch us. It's going to be brilliant.
As my pre-disclaimer to the disclaimer, my husband is away for work, so I have been left home alone with my child, and we have been just tearing the world apart. So if he wakes up, there's no one else to go to him but me. So if I down tools and just it's because a tiny tyrant has awoken from his pit. So that's the pre-disclaimer. Shall I just hop straight into the real disclaimer?
Yeah, do it.
Welcome, friends, to History After Dark. We called it that because we put it on at 8:15 GMT, BST, whatever you call it. And in the winter, it's dark here. But also because occasionally the topics we cover, the ways we talk about them, the terminology and wordage that we use can be dark. We are in the gutter. We are looking at the stars of history. And sometimes history is a bit gross and full of swears and smut and innuendo. So with that being said, we aim to educate. However, if you happen to be in an open plan office with a judgmental boss who's just looking for a reason, put a headphone in or wait and check us out on the replay. We're going to be on the replay of both IGTV and also of our YouTube channel. So make sure you are subscribed and following across both platforms, because some people are enjoying the YouTube setup. They prefer to interact with us over on YouTube. So see what you like best. Stay on both. I don't know. We're on both. We're definitely trying to figure that out. So there is the option to listen to it back. Alternatively, as well, if you're in the company of a small child, we call him Timmy for our purposes. Timmy is a dobber. Timmy is a problem.
He's going to get it.
Timmy is the kind of child that goes to their teacher and goes, Miss or Sir, what does insert? I haven't finished explaining it, so I'm not going to say it. Insert something vulgar here. What does insert something aubergine emoji? Something vulgar mean? If you don't get called up to school by Mrs. Patterson, then I suggest you put a headphone in or swap your child at Battersea. They don't like that. I have tried. With that being said, we're all here for a good time, and this will be available on the replay unless we say something so reprehensible. It's happened once before.
It has happened
so once. Disgraceful, so libelous that we have to yeet this footage into the sun. So it's always worth being here live, because there are times, one time in particular, where it all got a bit too much, and it may get a bit too much again. But we're here and we're going to talk about shagging.
Right.
Yes.
And on that note, now disclaimer is issued. Maeve in a Forest Witch. If you haven't seen her thing she did of I don't like tea, then directly towards that. But
Brilliant.
I like to have you ladies both ways, and I do not mean it that way.
Why not?
Well, you can mean it that way. I mean, we're down with that, so it's all good.
Everything's a deal if you're brave enough.
And everything is also lube, apparently, if you think it's worth a go. So I have Instagram comments. I think Philippa has up on YouTube.
I have YouTube, and I have set up a poll on YouTube.
Or did they or didn't they? That's amazing.
Did they
Sweet.
Or didn't they? So if you want to put your two-penneth into a poll on YouTube, you can go and find us on YouTube and do that.
Paige says she's just read Julia Fox and she's so ready for this.
Oh, good.
Marvellous.
Ready.
She can take over then. Paige, if you want to come
Yeah, I
up.
was going to say she might know more than we do.
If you get a bit stuck, in you pop.
Yeah.
Loads of people coming in saying hello on Instagram. Hi. Thank you so
Hello.
much for coming. We're quite excited. It's been a very busy few days. Right. So, yes, Tudor shagging. Who wants to start?
Or not.
Apart from Catherine and Arthur.
Well,
so
let's do some prelim. Let's do some prelim about how we get to the wedding night, the bedage, the question about whether the P went in the V or no. So
it's very technical.
Let's go back to the Battle of Bosworth, shall we?
Oh, wow.
Wow, okay.
I'm going to be quick.
Jesus
I'm going to move
Christ,
quickly. I'm going to move quickly from Bosworth. I'm going to move swiftly from Bosworth. So Henry VII trounces Richard III, and thus they say ends the War of the Roses. Although I don't think he would have known that. But what he becomes, well, exactly. What he then becomes is the monarch of a nascent dynasty of bastard stock that has come out of decades of civil war within the nobility. The country could not be in a less secure footing in terms of kingship and all of that good stuff. As he marries Elizabeth of York, and thus the two roses, York and Lancaster, they say, become one, and we see this Tudor rose. But of course, the real Tudor roses are going to be the children that this couple create. And they do, by the time we get to the point of the wedding, they do have 4 surviving children, 2 boys, 2 girls. And the big thing is going to be making matches for these children that really work. And Arthur is, of course, the prize. He is the eldest son. He is his father's heir. He will be King of England. And getting a infanta of the Trastamara house is an enormous get. For the Tudor dynasty, it's a really fabulous job. And Catherine of Aragon comes from incredible bloodline. Her mother, Isabella of Castile, and her father, Ferdinand of Aragon. They are known as the Catholic kings. They, in many ways, unify large parts of Spain, which had not been unified in ways before, through their marriage. This strengthens their power base. They are, in many ways, famous, most famous perhaps, for reclaiming Spain from the Islamic world. They Christianized that part of the world, and they set up their palace. They have the beautiful palace of the Alhambra. If you see the Spanish princess, you would have seen her at the Alhambra. There's lots of back and forth, and essentially they do have to kill somebody to get this marriage to work. They do have to kill Margaret Pole's brother, as it turns out, for this to all work out, because the Spanish aren't going to send over their infanta when there's a potential that somebody else has got a claim to the throne. So there's been, before it's all kicked off, there's been bloodshed. And why does that matter? Because in later decades, the murder of Warwick, I say, it's not, yes, it's Warwick, isn't
Warwick,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
In my
head, I was like, Exeter. That's not who it is. It's Warwick. I was right the first time.
Don't doubt yourself.
In much later decades, actually in the reign of Henry VIII, Buckingham is accused of saying the reason why Henry VIII can't get a son is because his bloodline is cursed because they killed Warwick. So before we even get to did they fuck or didn't they, there is stuff that's happening that people are saying is going to have a knock-on effect. The wedding takes place. Henry makes a holy show of himself, dancing up and down. He wants to be the centre of attention, star of the show. It's commented on how effusive he is. The couple themselves, their common language is Latin. So Catherine's going to have to learn to speak English pretty quickly. Otherwise, she's going to be talking and communicating in Latin with her husband. And then they go to bed. And what happens next becomes a question of a trial, lots of letters back and forth, papal bulls, the Marian regime. So this moment is going to be discussed for the better part of 50 years. So that's what I've got for you.
And it never is discussed, is it? It's assumed that it's just happened. It's assumed it's happened right up until Henry says, "Oh, this is a great reason not to be married to you anymore, Catherine." And Catherine says, "No, but we didn't actually ever do it." It never gets discussed before that. And there's sort of that's when we start to get the testimonies, don't we? Like, I can't remember who it was, but one of Arthur's gentlemen of the chamber or whatever they would have been, and he comes out of the bedroom the morning after, saying, "Gentlemen, bring me a cup of ale for this night I've been in the midst of Spain."
Anthony Willoughby, the Marquis of Dorset.
There we go. So and so he recalls this story years later.
Yeah,
it sounds like something, but
a teenage boy would say, whether they had or they hadn't.
He's 15, is he, at the time of their wedding?
Yeah.
I think at the time, so I mean, because what happens fairly quickly within a few months is that both of them fall ill, and unfortunately Arthur doesn't survive the illness. It's possible that they both had the sweating sickness, but that Arthur had a pre-existing condition, or that he was just worse affected. But regardless, he passes away. I think at that time it's assumed they have, because Catherine is kept watch over. Henry isn't proclaimed Prince of Wales or his father's heir, because they're wondering whether there might be a baby in the belly. Catherine's chief lady is saying they didn't. The Spanish ambassador is saying they did, and Catherine is saying nada. And quite why there's this confusion about it, I think they're trying to figure out which would make her state better, being a widow who could have a baby in her belly, or being essentially a widow who didn't have sex. Because Henry VII is wily. I think leaving the question up for grabs is a good thing, because if Henry's like, well, your marriage wasn't consummated, so therefore you aren't the Dowager Princess of Wales, so yoink, I will have all your lovely things. He's already trying to rob her blind as it is. So I can see how not settling that question then makes some sense. And the papal bull that comes out to allow her to get married to Henry, that also potentially is up in the air. If on the off chance they may have consummated, is something along the wording, and then the Spanish later find an addendum document being regardless, the marriage is legal, whether they have or they haven't.
It's one word in Latin, isn't it? Aras, I think, or something, or Aras,
it translated as the dispensation.
Turns out to perhaps.
Yeah, the dispensation from Pope Julius stated perhaps had been consummated.
Yeah. Forsan, I think is the word.
Not like a pope to give it leeway either way.
Yeah. Interesting.
The thing about Donna Elvira, who was Catherine's lady, and the few ladies that came with her from Spain, was allowed to stay with her, and obviously had known Catherine for a very long time. You would say, and that would certainly be one of my major arguments for supporting the fact that Catherine and Arthur hadn't done the deed, was for, Catherine would be the person, probably, she was quite isolated. Like you said, they had one common language. She was very new. Everything was new. Everything was cold and a bit dark and horrible, basically. And she didn't have many people that she could trust and love around her. And so one person that I'm sure she would have confided in would have been this lady, who also, I believe, had a fairly good relationship with her mother. So it seems likely that if Donna Elvira wrote to Isabella of Castile and said, this has not happened, to me, that seems quite a convincing argument for the fact that that hadn't happened. The only thing possibly against that, and I'm not accusing this woman of lying, because on balance, I don't think that she would, is that there had been some arguments. So her and her husband had not been being paid by Henry VII. So they had had words. And the other thing as well is, if the marriage wasn't consummated, it brings in the question that the dowry then doesn't have to be paid. So is there then an issue where there has been, you can expose Arthur as being not manly enough because he hasn't done the deed. So there's an issue of the dowry. And I think it's possibly a bit petty to say, well, we're going to say that your son was impotent because he hasn't paid our wages. That's perhaps a bit harsh, but I think the point comes back to, no matter who it is, there is a possibility that they have enough of a motive to tell a bit of a porky. And if Ferdinand is saying to Donna Elvira, you need to say this, if he has somehow managed to get some sort of message across to her that hasn't been intercepted, to say, you need to say this so that I don't have to pay this dowry, then he's kind of still her boss in a way, I guess. Would she do that?
Yeah.
Or would she not want to besmirch Catherine's reputation?
I mean, I think there's nothing besmirching her. If Catherine has sex with Arthur, they are married.
I didn't mean it like that.
God.
I kind of meant like she is saying one thing when it wasn't true, to try and make, nobody wants to make Catherine look like a liar, is what I meant when I said that. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, I think the thing is that whatever narrative is being spun in the aftermath, I think we have to look at two moments. We have to look at the aftermath of Arthur's death, where I can see how some inscrutability of the issue is a good thing, because on the one hand, if they haven't, then potentially it's not a real marriage, so what's the question of the dowry? But if they have, and it's a consummated marriage, then she's Dowager Princess of Wales. So, and status comes with that. Status, protection, and prominence. There is nothing really to prevent a pope. I mean, Catherine and Arthur could have been married 6 years and had 2 pregnancies, and Henry still could have married her. Because I mean, he married Catherine Parr. No one's going to expect her to be a virgin. I think there's I think also it gets wrapped up in the fact that we have this story that our current king was allowed to marry Diana because she was a virgin, and so there becomes this idea that kings can only marry virgins, and that's made up. That's not the case. They don't want to marry promiscuous women because that's their particular agenda, but they can marry widows, and they can marry people who've had their marriages annulled. It is what it is.
Someone's made a good comment. So Aria put up in the comments that Henry VIII would have known if Catherine was a virgin on their wedding night. So I presume what she's referring to there is the possibility of the blood on the sheets. So that is something now. But then
that doesn't happen to everybody.
No, I know, but we're looking at, was 500 years ago, how much store may have they taken in that? And I believe it was the tradition in Spain, but not here, to hang the sheets out the night after the wedding, so that you could see whether or not the new bride had bled onto the sheets. So I wonder how much, as you know, there can be all sorts of reasons why someone doesn't bleed after the first time they've had sex. That, you know, there can be all sorts of reasons for that. But back then, you know, we talk about how different knowledge of medicine, how much store may have that. With some people might have gone, she hasn't bled, so she wasn't a virgin. There may have been people who really would have put all their store in that.
I mean, that isn't something that's discussed. They don't talk about whether or not she bled. And also, Henry is not a good judge of a virgin. Because he claims that Anne of Cleves is not one, and that Catherine Howard is one. So when it comes to him being able to spot a virgin, he is not a good judge.
But he may well at that point just be assuming, like everyone else, that their marriage was consummated. It only bothers him 20 years later when he's trying to get out, when he's trying to annul the marriage. He doesn't want to divorce her. He wants to annul it, pretend it never happened, and almost start again. So it's not even a thing.
Deuteronomy is clearly misquoted. Like, let's get biblical. Like the Deuteronomy quotation where it talks about if a man lies with his brother's wife, or if a man takes his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing. They shall be childless. That's clearly not talking about a widow. It's clearly talking about a man coveting his brother's wife and committing adultery with her. They will be childless. Clearly. Whereas the other passage of the Bible that specifies that if your brother dies, you should take his wife and children and raise them as your own, that is actually what's going on. And so the Pope completely did have the reason to give a dispensation for this degree of affinity. But bearing in mind, Henry then also happily went on and married Anne Boleyn, despite the fact that he fucked her sister, which also created a degree of affinity. He would also have needed a dispensation to marry Jane Seymour because they were too closely related themselves.
You're almost implying that Henry made it up as he went along.
I would never.
Is it Deuteronomy or Leviticus?
Leviticus.
Oh, Leviticus. And
Leviticus.
Is it Deuteronomy that's the thing about the... Oh, no, Deuteronomy is the one about...
I can't remember what the opposing one was.
Take, right. Look after your brother's widow.
And Tara Herbert and her mum. No, there was an accusation that Henry had carnal relations with Elizabeth Boleyn, but the quote wasn't that someone mentioned all three to him and he said never the mother. Or not with the mother. And I don't believe there is any particular real reason to believe that Henry had a fling of any capacity with Elizabeth Boleyn. Nee Howard.
Do you want to know what the current poll results are on YouTube?
Yes.
so we've got 70% yes, 30% no at the moment. Lee said on Instagram that Catherine was too pious to lie. Maybe we'll come back to that one. There's another one that I wanted to talk about. Aria has said Arthur was too sick to consummate the marriage, potentially, but I'm not sure whether people get Arthur and Edward a little bit mixed up, because Arthur was not a sickly man or teenager up until the point he was sick enough to die.
Because I think this is one of the reasons, isn't it? Well, until more recently, the story always has been there was no way they did it. There was no way they did it. And it only seems to be more recently that the narrative that maybe that they did, that argument seems to become a lot stronger, I think, more recently. And that's one of the things we have this image of Arthur as this poor little sort of, young, frail lad that might snap in half if he coughs too hard. But actually, he was... if he'd been really, really poorly, I can't think, surely they wouldn't have just sent him. I know he had to go to Ludlow because that was the seat of the Prince of Wales, but I can't help thinking there would be more records of him needing a lot more medical care and things like that if he was always so poorly.
Well, exactly. It's actually, you talked about Edward, Philippa, and it's the same thing. People talk about how he was a sickly child. He wasn't. He had a protracted illness. He had a sort of series of illnesses, but in quite a short period of time, didn't he? He hadn't been sickly up until that point. Of his life, when he got really unwell.
Can I tell you about an interesting theory, though, that I came across that's interesting?
Oh, before you do that, I just a comment went up. You can still feel fruity when you're, and I want to point out that some people talk about. Some people talk about how Arthur may have had, what complicated the sweating sickness was that he had tuberculosis. And people say that having tuberculosis would be a reason why he couldn't do it. I'm like, I'm sorry, that is the exact opposite. People with tuberculosis have these periods they lay in bed a lot because they've got TB, but they have periods where they rally and famously shaggers. Famously shaggers. But it's something that, kind of like when you're watching like Moulin Rouge and Satine. My mum told me about it. She used to tell me a lot of really inappropriate things for my age. But it was kind of common knowledge that in the old Victorian back-to-back slums and things that there was loads of TB and there were loads of kids because TB makes you fruity. I don't know if that's true. My mum told me it could be an old wives' tale.
If you haven't got long to live, go and get TB as well.
An upside.
Somebody just said here, Jen Brandon, I'm making an assumption here that this will happen after a wedding feast, aka was he pissed? Well, I don't know, but we're talking about the whole of their
6 months worth of
not
marriage.
Just 1 night.
5, 6.
So he may. I wouldn't have thought he'd been absolutely annihilated.
Well, I think that kind of he was in public at this wedding feast, and I do think like while you might get a little bit tipsy, they do drink a lot more, and alcohol is less strong. I think if he was behaving in a way that was really embarrassing, something would have been said about that. So he kind of been that arsehole because people would have potentially commented on the fact that he couldn't If they're talking about Prince Henry dancing around like a twat, they're probably going to comment on Prince Arthur being so pissed he can barely stand, would be my opinion.
Tara's put, which I think, was this what you said, Philippa? It seems strange that people would document the heirs would be poorly growing up for alliances and for fear of being seen as weak. Yeah, if you're trying to create a massive political alliance, you're not going to want to marry your daughter to somebody who's going to mump it at any moment, are you?
So yes, good point.
So right, okay, so Kyra Kramer, if anyone's come across her, is a medical anthropologist, and she's written a lot on the medical conditions of Henry VIII, and she's one of the big people who went, can we get rid of this syphilis bollocks? She might not have used the word bollocks.
Should.
But she should have done, because that's basically what she was saying. So she's postulated the theory.
Nice
and when
word.
I was looking at, thank you very much. It's one of my favourite words.
I like juxtapose.
That's also
delicious.
An excellent word.
Nice.
Not relevant here, but yeah.
We'll try and weave it in
Why
somewhere.
not?
So she thinks that Arthur and Edward VI and Fitzroy all had or died of non-classic atypical cystic fibrosis, and you know how they all had like breathing difficulties towards the end, and she said, and one of the complications of that can be COPD, and another complication of that can be erectile dysfunction. So it could be, if that was the case, that Arthur was unable to consummate. Now, Edward VI obviously died before he got married, so forth, and he never had a chance to have a relationship to consummate that. Now, I thought, oh, well, Fitzroy. And then I thought about it, and I remember reading loads of stuff about Fitzroy when I was pretending I was going to write a book about the Howards. Now, he was married to Lady Mary Howard, who was one of the daughters of the 3rd Duke of Norfolk. And they were married. And when I thought about it, I was like, right. And I remember now, because there was an argument about this when he died, about what she should get, because they were trying to con her out of some stuff as well.
How long had they been married?
The marriage was never consummated. And I can't remember exactly how long they were married, but it was a couple of years.
Because I was surprised.
They weren't living together, though. There was conversation whether they should live together as man and wife because they were young. But and there is talk about all the pictures, particularly of Edward. He does look quite like drawn in the face, like they all strike me as thin people. Yes. But equally, Henry VII also looks very thin too, which I think is where people get the TB thing from, because when you've got TB, as well as being a shagger, according to my mum, I don't know if that's true.
That's why you're thin, because you're having so much sex.
I mean, I think certainly, though, I am aware that cystic fibrosis, one of the things is that you're less able to take in calories because the mucus coats your gut as well, so you can't take in nutrients. You have to have really high value nutrients to put on weight. So that they would look very similar. And I also would be interested to know what the life because all of these boys are dying at around 15.
That's what
they're all dying at 15.
I think it was Fitzroy. I think was 17.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but similar sort of.
So he's old roughly enough to be consummating his marriage at 17.
So they were talking about keeping them apart when they were younger. Not once you hit 17.
But then maybe they knew he was unhealthy, so they were keeping them apart for his health.
Didn't they think? Sorry, didn't they? Because didn't Anne Boleyn get accused even posthumously of poisoning?
Yes,
Henry Fitzroy.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if she's going to poison anyone, it'd be Mary.
Yeah.
I mean,
Henry. I'd have poisoned him, given my. Who can you poison?
Pretty impressive. Henry. It's pretty impressive to do it from the grave as well. I mean, you know.
Wow.
She's witchcraft,
mate.
Top witch. Yeah.
Comment from Lottie Rose here. Lottie Rose, tuberculosis makes you fruity was not one I had on my History After Dark bingo card tonight, but I'm totally here for it.
We need to make History After Dark bingo cards.
We're going to do that for Christmas. We'll do that for our Christmas one.
After Dark, as people are mentioning, After Dark bingo card. The 15-year-old have had the confidence to consummate.
Were you 15 ever?
I think. Yeah.
Have you been 15?
Yes. And having known 15-year-old boys,
like a rat up a drain pipe, mate. All the confidence, none of the skill.
Pretty much that. Yeah. Can I just
My
say
midwife.
how many viewers you ladies have tonight? This is amazing. Thank you, Tara. Yeah, I've been looking at the numbers. People like
Thanks,
us.
guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for liking us. We are mostly nice.
You like us.
Oh,
You really like
Philippa. Dinkum
Yes?
and Kim. Arthur's wife was juxtaposed into his brother Henry's bed. Oh, God. That is superb English grammar skills going on right there. You win that award for this month, I think. Margaret Beaufort also likely had a thin frame. Well, they did talk about how petite she was, didn't they?
And how underdeveloped she was. I mean, I think anybody who's giving birth at the age she was giving birth at is, but they commented on how small she was, even for the period and for her age. So yeah, but then she did. I mean, I don't think there's any evidence that she had CF, because she did live to be older than the sun.
Yes. She did well.
She's probably still alive, really.
She was the eternal grandmother.
She rode up to the Pembroke Castle on a T-Rex. That's how old she was. And still she endured. Yes, bless her. Love a bit of Margaret Beaufort.
On a T-Rex.
Philippa, on a T-Rex. There's a piece of merch right there.
Yeah.
Margaret Beaufort on a T-Rex. How's the poll going? Are we still at 70-30?
We're still at 70-30. We've had, I don't think everyone watching has voted, so maybe they're holding out to see if we can persuade them either way.
As we're roughly halfway through, right? Let's just do a straw poll of us ladies. Show just little hand up, little paw up. Who thinks they did, who thinks they didn't. So first of all, little paw up for who thinks they did the nasty.
I don't know.
Paw up for who thinks they didn't do the nasty.
See, I think they might have tried.
I think they attempted.
Something must have cracked off. They were like
Something
teenagers with a lot of pressure on them to do this. Even if they didn't want to do it, which they probably would have done because they were teenagers, but even if they didn't want to, and apparently they quite liked each other. Like, it's not like one of those dynastic marriages where you just want to vomit at the thought of that other person's existence.
They're both. Katherine of Aragon is beautiful. She is beautiful. She is.
He was punching, wasn't he?
Auburn-haired beauty. She's exotic. She's come fresh from Spain. You know, she's cool. Her mum's a warrior. Like, she's anybody would want to. And as you rightly said, they had been exchanging letters as well, which and they liked each other as people. You're completely right. And they knew what their duty was, which was to bang out as many boys, preferably, and some girls, but preferably boys first, bang out as many blokes as they possibly could. So yeah, I mean, even if they were a bit overwhelmed to consummate on the wedding night, I think they would have tried.
At some stage.
Yeah.
This is a Mayfair Forest Witch. Tommen from Game of Thrones is pretty much the definition of a 15-year-old boy shagging for the first time in his life. Quote, "This is all I want to do. All day, every day, for the rest of my life." Fair.
Fair point.
Yeah. Yes, bit of heavy petting. Maybe the bowl cut turned her off. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't have done much for me, to be fair. Aria says not consummated. I'm on the Mayfair Forest. I'm on the wagon of they tried. They had a good go, bless them.
They had a good go, bless them.
Go.
Yeah,
it's like you say about that though. The pressure. Everyone stood outside waiting, having a beer.
Yes, but that's
one
not
ear to the door.
Yes, but that was what was expected. That's not like that would
really
unusual. Like other people managed. Yeah, but I know. I mean, yeah, it's not ideal, but other people managed. Yeah.
Jen, they tried and something fucked up. Well, not him, obviously. Katherine let him say they did to save his embarrassment, but wasn't up for saying they actually did when it came down to the trial. Lisa reckons it was a fumble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe her upper thigh got a good seeing too, but not much else. Is it in yet? No one knows.
Maybe it was all over before it started.
Where's it supposed to go?
Yeah. I mean,
what's that dump patch?
I think the thing is this. No, I mean, come on, we've said worse. I know I have. I do think though, there's also they would have known the mechanics of like it's I think again we sometimes look at history through the fake veil of the Victorian sensibility that somehow that any mother would send her daughter so unprepared into a marriage. And I am thinking of Bridgerton. Oh, that's Paige. That's a very that's a very Mormon phrase I've just seen pop up there. So we'll get to that in a second. I think that it's unlikely that people would put two young people to bed in that way and not tell them how they make a baby.
You're right. We're thinking of it through prudish eyes of the Victorians, as
who
if
were all
everyone
hypocrites anyway.
who were doing it anyway with everyone they could. So that anyone who came before that must also have clearly been prudish, because that's, you know, we're always moving forward, which is bullshit, but that's what the Victorians like to get us to believe. So you're right. Yeah, that it's too important. It's too important. And actually, God is saying, right, this is now your duty.
Yes. Go forth and multiply.
Go forth and multiply. Make more little God-fearing humans, please.
Yes. We've got a conquest. We've got some, I don't know, a crusade. I need cannon fodder.
Need people. Yeah.
I need cannon fodder for my crusade.
Yeah.
Basically, that'd be a good summary of it, really.
But yes, there was a comment on Instagram that maybe they did some soaking. And for anybody who is not aware what soaking is,
you're about to find out.
I am led.
Is
to
that
believe... something
not to Google?
No,
we need to say that in the disclaimer as well. We forgot that today.
I am from my
anything. It's on your own heads.
From my research of binge watching shows about Mormons, I understand that it's something that they
do.
That it's not sex if you don't move it about. So soaking is putting it in and letting it soak.
It's not sex if you don't move it about.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would stand up in court. If you'll pardon the expression.
Robbie reckons maybe he had an early delivery issue.
Oh.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
They're coming thick and fast now. I can't keep up with
I know.
everything.
Yeah. I've just seen the Instagram comments have gone brrr, so I
Would they be formally? There is loads. I'm not sure we can keep up. Neither could Arthur. This could go on all night. Neither could Arthur.
Neither could Arthur. In a way that Arthur could not.
Yes. The possibilities are endless. Unless you're Arthur, on and on it goes. Right. What next? What else could possibly have gone wrong? Boasting courtiers. So all these chaps stood outside going, yeah, he gave her a good scene too. Are these gentlemen, I use the term fairly loosely, a reliable source of information, ladies and gentlemen? What do we think of that?
No,
well, that was a short conversation. Okay, let's pad it out by saying, okay, why don't we think they were a reliable source of information? Let's put aside for the fact that it's quite obvious.
I think.
Hang on,
there's
saving face. My earpiece for now. Hang on. Right, so here's the thing. Like these,
it in.
Get it
in.
There we go. This is just
any hole.
Any hole's a goal. These lads who are there to do attendance on Arthur and Catherine in the marital chamber, they are there if somebody's going to shout out, being like, bring me ale, or my foot is cold, fetch me a stocking. I don't know, whatever you might need. But what I don't believe this thing of like them listening at the door. Like they might be like, wait, but eventually they're gonna fall to playing cards and drinking, and they aren't going to be spying through peepholes, because that's weird. And no one's doing that. So they do a bit of ribald humour, I'm sure, and then they sit about and gamble and, you know, lose the family farm and do whatever fucked up shit super privileged wanker boys do.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Paige, any holes a goal, put that on a shirt.
Yeah.
No.
It's going on. No. It's going on the bingo card.
Yes, a good one for the bingo card. I think as well, a lot of these chaps are sort of, you know, some of them are giving this evidence.
Well, it's going to be saving face, isn't it?
Yeah, and they, you know, Henry, they can't go out and go, well, actually, I think he fucked it. No, he didn't. I think
The other one.
The other one.
The other one.
I think he fucked it because he didn't fuck it. So, you know, they've got to come and go, yes, big man. Well done, Arthur. Son of king. Marvellous job.
They may,
and then later on, they've got to say what Henry VIII wants them to say, or they're going to die.
They may well, when they're first asked, just been genuinely perplexed by the question.
Yeah, it should just be an assumption.
This is what happened the day after. I don't know what it means, but this is what he said.
In the midst of Spain.
In the bring me a cup of ale for tonight. I've been in the midst of Spain. I mean, it's fairly graphic in what
I mean, but equally, he might have been motorboating her and be like, I'm a bit thirsty, lads. Oh, very thirsty.
You think they went straight into those kind of games?
I don't think they were meant to do things like that. Wasn't it like
that's
you have to do
out the ordinary? You got to do vanilla.
The extras. Yeah,
you need it's got to be vanilla. Otherwise, it's
women need to orgasm. Women need to orgasm.
I know,
but not with beer.
But not like
not with beer in places that
beer.
You said like, taking beer. Oh, okay. I'm thinking something different.
I was saying, like, get her boobs and rub his face in it. Give her a motorboat.
Yeah,
that's
what I'm talking about. Beer in there as well. Anyway,
that's water sports. We're in a whole.
Yes. Don't think they're meant to do that. But
that's
who knows?
Waste of good beer. Yeah.
Right. They didn't. So, Spirit of Tudor. Now, this is a good point. They didn't do it. Henry was speechless during the hearing. Now, this is a fair point, I think. At Blackfriars, when Catherine sort of prostrated herself on the floor and said to Henry, you know, I came to you with, you know, I was a maiden without touch of a man. And I can't remember the exact word, but it was something about whether it be true or no.
I leave it to your
conscience.
Yeah.
She was saying, you know, you have to decide. And he didn't say anything. And I find that interesting because surely if he was, and we've already intimated here that we don't, you know, this is something he was making up for his convenience as he went along. But, you know, if he really thought, or he could genuinely convince people that they'd done the dirty when they hadn't, then surely he should have stood up then and said, well, you're saying you didn't, but actually I think you did because you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or you knew what you were doing, or, you know, he had an opportunity. So she confronted him and she said, right, you tell me what your conscience truly believes. And he was...
Yeah. I mean, also when pressed upon it, he basically said that the dispensation doesn't matter. That, I mean, I think for Henry, he was grasping at straws, but for him, he was sure the lack of a living son by his wife was evidence of God's displeasure. And whether or not the marriage to Arthur had been consummated, whether or not the Pope could dispense in either case, Henry was sure that God, for some reason, was displeased with the marriage. Couldn't be with him.
No, absolutely not.
And I think on the flip side of it, there, as I've said many times before, other queens would have walked away. Catherine chose to stand and fight. I think everything got hung up on this question of consummation, but ultimately Henry wants to put her aside because he wants a male heir. And
he needs a male heir.
And there are countless ways that he could go about doing that, but he's swapping and changing, flipping back and forth. But ultimately the lack of sons could have been used as a reason for her to go, do you know what? I've entered menopause. I should stand aside. I'll go and be the abbess at Sion. I'll have a lovely life.
Because we take evidence that Catherine couldn't possibly have consummated marriage and then lied about it because due to her piety. The same sort of assumption doesn't get given to Henry, and I'm not normally one to stick up for Henry, but in his belief that God, like you say, is actually he's looking for a reason. Why has he offended God? He has offended God. He knows he's offended God because he hasn't got sons, so therefore it must be something, and so he's looking for what is it. I mean, it actually can't be him. It can't be him because he's God's anointed, so it can't be him.
Oh, and he has boys as well. Fitzroy's alive.
And
Mm.
Fitzroy's alive. So he's got proof that he can father a child that survives, etc. So, so we don't seem to credit Henry with that kind of piety the same way as we credit Catherine with the piety that makes her say that, you know, that justifies us believing her when she says she didn't consummate the marriage. Do you see where I'm
I mean,
getting at?
pious women are obedient to their husbands also. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay,
See,
so she didn't really follow that one
the
through.
piety, I think, is like, and I'm just picking up something Jen's saying about doing stuff. Is the piety? I think there was a very good argument because Catherine was wasn't she so determined she wouldn't walk away. She was this and she was that. But I did read something very interesting yesterday or today, whenever it was, about this, is that apparently Thomas More and Bishop Fisher, who were obviously big advocates of supporting the marriage between Catherine and Henry, both told the people around them, so probably applied more to their staff initially, but they were saying that it is okay to lie if it is for God's greater good.
Lying for the Lord.
So if Catherine would have thought, well, you know, it's going to secure my daughter, it's going to stabilize England, you know, it's going to save Henry's soul and all these types of things, then she could have felt that that lie was justified. Because as well, don't forget, we're playing with the Catholic faith here, so you can pop along to the confessional later and go, oh no, sorry, I did tell a fib, but I did it for a good reason, and they'll go off you trot. Then
I want to throw in there though, if Catherine had allowed the marriage to be annulled through the Pope, as Henry wanted, there was a pre-existing set of circumstances whereby Mary would not have had to be named illegitimate. Because her parents married in good faith, even though their marriage was annulled, if it had never happened, Mary would still be rendered and recognised as Henry's legitimate child and thus his heir, unless a boy was born. There would have been no reason to divorce from Rome. Now, and thus he would have been free to marry Anne Boleyn. So a lot of the other stuff about protecting the faith and protecting Mary's future, if Catherine had gone, do you know what, I recognise that the future of England depends, in your mind, on getting a male heir. So what can we do about giving me a lovely retirement where I get treated in the luxury and status that I deserve? And there were options. There were options because, of course, when she's buried as Princess Dowager of Wales. She could have lived as Princess Dowager of Wales. Yes.
That's an option. It's really interesting what you say. I like that point that you make about, you know, Mary didn't actually have to be made illegitimate because there's provision for that. That children can be legitimate if the marriage was taken in good faith. Mayfair Forest Witch over on YouTube, she's on both places. For royalty, the whole point of sex was to make heirs, so I would assume consummation meant ejaculation. Yes, but it has to be in the right place, doesn't it? Is that what
why? Where do you think he's sticking it?
Well, if he's not managing to get there in time, like Robert suggested, he has an early delivery issue, then
I went the wrong way with that.
Okay.
Which is,
do you want to know what
the
latest poll suggests? 64% say yes, 36% say no. So the no's are coming.
It's swinging in. It's swinging in.
Yeah.
I mean, also though, people frequently see childlessness as evidence of non-consummation and of unhappy marriages. I find the conversation about having atypical CF, I find that very interesting. That's a very interesting argument.
Kyra's stuff is really interesting.
I think that's fascinating.
You can get her stuff.
But I mean, also, every piece of evidence says that they were happy in each other's company. Every piece of evidence would point to the fact that they had opportunity to have sex. What we know is that Catherine was never pregnant. However, she did allow herself to be observed as if she might be. She did allow that to happen. Now, who's instructing that to happen? Is it because she thinks she might be? Or is somebody going, act as if it's happened? Act as if that's what's happened. I do think that at the time, in the crisis of Arthur's early death, and that's what it would have been in her life, Let's bear that in mind. In the crisis of this teenager's life in a foreign land, having recovered from her own sickness, where they thought she might die too. So she's just escaped death. Her husband is dead. She hasn't got any place in this country, really. I can imagine taking the advice of a variety of people some going, say it wasn't consummated, say it was consummated, all of this kind of back and forth. Her just going, I'm not going to say anything. And I'm going to let everybody else talk. I'm going to let the question hang in the air, because while it's a question, I will get treated the way I'm being treated. I mean, granted, Henry wasn't great with her when she was Dowager Princess of Wales. So it was a pretty miserable time, I think, in between Arthur's death and her marriage to Henry. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. The fact that she's very close to going, just, you know what, I'll go back to Spain.
Yeah.
Enough of this.
Yeah.
Miserable. And that, I think, is probably, people have said that is why she doesn't capitulate to Henry later, because she spent time in the wilderness, in the English wilderness, having to sell her plate to pay her servants and put clothes on her back, having to beg her bread. She's done it. And she is not going to do it again. And I can imagine there must have been an incredible trauma at that time, especially considering during that period, her mother died. So she's experiencing profound loss and not being able to properly mourn. She can't go back to Spain for what's happening. So she's in a foreign country. Her mother dies. She's being treated like absolute shite by her father-in-law. And the person that she's supposed to marry is like just doing what his dad says. Just, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm just doing whatever my dad says. It must have been bloody miserable.
Somebody asked, can't remember who it was. I think it was it Deb? Where's the poll? The poll is on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, Clackus, that's an awesome name. Could Catherine have been doing penance by staying in discomfort and by keeping her story? She was a little bit of a self-flagellator, wasn't she?
Oh, she was all hair shirt,
She was all over the starving herself and hair shirts. So
yeah,
I mean, it's not possible. It's not possible.
I would point out
it's a possibility. It's viable.
Both Wolsey and Campeggio said to Catherine that she should retire. They tried to convince her. So she's, let's be completely clear. She's disobeying her husband. She's disobeying one of the leading cardinals of her country, and she's also disobeying the papal legate sent by the Pope to hear her case. Both of whom are going, retire.
Thing is, though, she wouldn't have had any time for Wolsey, because she'd have known Wolsey was doing it just to save his own neck.
But Campeggio?
Yeah, that's a different
She defies both of them, and also her husband.
Someone's put, where's Nathan? This isn't Nathan's favourite bit. Henry VII is but I don't know if it means when we were talking about Catherine's time between the two husbands, but I don't think he's as bothered about that, if I'm being completely honest, based on our previous discussions.
I mean, of course, he should be here to speak on behalf of the Prince of Wales.
Yes, as he is, in fact, the Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales.
The actual Prince of Wales. I've informed the palace. Claire Connolly, starving constantly doesn't help bearing children. Yeah, she may have affected her fertility.
In fact, it was such a problem that Henry VIII wrote to the Pope and wrote to spiritual advisors, being like, "Can you please tell her to eat and stop wearing the hair shirts?" Because he thought it was having an issue. So they're recognising that.
The irony of that, though, that she's probably one of the reasons she's probably doing that is to ingratiate herself to God, to fill her womb, and that's possibly one of the things that was stopping it.
Yeah,
it's so sad. It's just awful, really.
Yeah.
Shall
I feel sorry for Catherine. What a miserable bloody life.
Yeah,
like she had this kind of window in the sun, and it was just miserable.
Yeah.
I mean, she was ambassador to Spain in Henry VII's court for a short while, wasn't she? When I can't remember what happened to the ambassador, but she was the one in charge of conversing with her father for a while.
And imagine
So
that
it
split
looked
loyalty.
very. Oh yeah, well I think Henry VII possibly did that completely on purpose. Not only, of course, can she speak the 2 languages, which is also very useful, but it does put her in that position, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Of having is forced loyalty to her new country.
Yeah.
So here's one. Don't think it's a bit contentious. Aria, Catherine wasn't infertile. It was Henry's fault, as Anne Boleyn also suffered miscarriage and stillbirths.
Well, there's certainly an argument that he may have been Kell positive, which may well have had an effect on his wife's capacity to carry babies. With Anne Boleyn, there's talk that she actually may have had the rhesus blood syndrome. So the first pregnancy is fine, and then every subsequent pregnancy attacks the fetus, who if it's not hasn't got the same rhesus status, I believe. I'm not an expert. I've only banged out the one kid.
Well, Kyra writes about that as well in her research.
So I think there's definitely it could be 6 of one and half dozen of the other. There is her first pregnancy is a disaster, by anybody's standards. She has this pregnancy, there is a loss, she remains swollen. Her doctors tell her it must have been twins. This goes on, and then her belly what's the word I'm looking for? Stops being swollen. It does this. What's that? Deflate. Bloody hell. Deflate. Jesus Christ. I could not remember the word deflate. Wow. I need to have some food. So what that points to is that there was a pregnancy that failed and an infection. Infections in that region, untreated infections in that region, are not great for the fallopian tubes, not great for carrying future pregnancies, all of that sort of stuff. And she does have 2 live births, Mary and also little Prince Henry. And his early death is just very, very tragic.
Yeah, it is.
And unclear why it happens. But, Henry is capable of producing children too. And far after Catherine, Elizabeth, and then also Edward. So he's not infertile, but gynecology is a messy business, and also a lot of these people are related, not closely, but still,
but related enough.
I think there's a very high percentage chance that the individuals at court, just generally at court, so many of them can trace their bloodlines back to Edward I. That's one of the reasons why they're there. So these are all people from a branch of a family tree. If there's going to be a genetic nonsense happening, like something, porphyria that we see popping up down the family line, haemophilia, atypical CF, whatever it might be, it's going to happen in those families. And on top of that, it's going to mean that life-limiting birth defects and also things that might cause spontaneous abortion, all of that is going to be more common in people who have close genetic ties. The gene pool is a puddle, friends. It's a puddle.
I'm really interested in the environmental factors. I'd love someone to look into that more, because I wonder if we weren't talking about queens, whether we would be looking for such big reasons, or whether we would be saying, well, they didn't get to eat some enough, or they would starve themselves on for religious purposes, or we'd just see what I mean. It's sort of a bigger deal, because these are queens we're talking about that don't queens and princesses that don't have children. Whereas and then the temptation is to look for a bigger reason. I mean, yeah, of course, the genetic stuff is there, but we're not talking when the children are born that survive any weird abnormalities, deformities. If the cystic fibrosis theory holds, though, but we're still not seeing that in its full sort of horrendous form.
Well, I mean, the thing is, both Mary and Elizabeth have gynecological issues. There is something going on.
But again, does that have to be something inherited? Can that be something to do with the type of lifestyle there?
I think it's Claire that's, oh no, Clackus has put, I think I've obviously missed some comments further up. She's put all the paint on the walls or whatever. So yeah, so we all think about like, what was it like? Philippa said, what's in the environment, what the paint in the rooms, the crap you're putting on your face, the better healthcare. So, you know, like Philippa said, we take no notice of other ladies, their stories aren't recorded. Would they have had more or less pregnancies? So, and these are all averages and things like that. But actually, although they didn't have nice, warm environments as much, or maybe the food wasn't as rich, or all these types of things, they also couldn't afford and wouldn't have worn nice makeup.
I mean, we don't know the context, though, do we? Someone might, but I don't know if either you two, but we don't know what was the what's the general population, you know, managing to produce and not produce, and you know, like
we don't know
what's the wider context. We're looking at very specific cases and trying to work out what happened in those without the context, which is really difficult. Would you like to know the final results of the poll?
Yes,
I'm intrigued now.
53% say yes to 47% no.
Ooh, we swung that round, ladies. We swung that round.
There you go.
And I actually think that's actually very, very telling, because I think that everybody in that court in Blackfriars would have approached it with their own opinions, and they would have come at it going, yep, I know exactly what happened. And I think over the course of it and over the time as it all plays out, I don't think anybody knew for sure, apart from Catherine.
Yeah.
I don't think Henry knew for sure.
Arthur.
Well, he parked
was quite dead by that point. Yeah,
I don't believe Henry knew for sure either way either, and I think that's very clear. I don't believe that Henry knew either way. Catherine is the only one that knew, who was still alive.
She wasn't telling. Well, she was only telling it one way,
or she was giving her narrative.
She was telling it. Yeah. So, are we going to wrap
Elizabeth
it up
Woodfield didn't have any issue producing children. No, she was very enthusiastic in that capacity.
Well done, Lizzie.
Yes. Shame about her sons. But anyway, we all watched The Spanish Princess. I didn't.
I watched the first episode, and when Henry walked out, I was like, he's a big lad. he's a big lad. He's awfully big. Considering he's supposed to be a child.
Right. I don't think I watched it.
No, I heard so many things. I was like, no, I can't bring myself to watch this. And I didn't have stars, which was the other thing. So maybe. I think one of the frustrating things about history, having this discussion, and what Philippa was saying just now about how there's no wider context about the environment, is the more we learn, the more we realise we don't know.
Yeah.
So the more we learn, the less we know. This is
that's what we should all admit as well. That's one thing history should teach us: a bit of humility. Learn to admit when you don't know. Be curious. Be open to new interpretations, new evidence,
and then take that impression into your everyday life.
Exactly.
As you approach everything, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
All sorts of media and other humans. Don't trust your first opinion or your judgment or what you've been told. Find out for yourself. Consult multiple sources.
Unless it's us, in which case we're right.
We've got it right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we've done the hard work for you.
Come here for some absolutism. And tyranny of our own kind.
Where else would you go?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we've gone just over the hour now. I think the poll was great. The fact that it started 70-30 and then we almost straight down the
Almost
middle.
got to 50-50. I'm going to close the poll now.
So that's very interesting. So I feel like we've imparted some useful thoughts and wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. As always, let us know what you think. You can get in contact with us in all the usual ways. We might get back to you, we might not. Let's just see what happens. Philippa, what's happening next week?
Well, next week, hopefully we have a special guest. We are having...
Hearts of the screen.
We're having Gareth Russell join us next week, which will be very, very good.
That is the bomb.
He is the bomb. The bomb. So we'll be talking. We're going to be talking about lots of stuff, I'm sure. He's just done a very interesting podcast on the buggery laws, which are very interesting. So we sort of touched on what was expected of sex in marriages, and it sort of covers that. So I'm quite intrigued to ask him about that. But of course, he's also got his new book out.
I can't wait to hear about that.
Mother, which I'm halfway through, which is fantastic and I've learned stuff about the Queen Mother I did not know, and I assumed I did know. So there you go. There's another lesson in don't assume.
I'm audibling that this week. I've nearly finished Chris Skidmore's Richard III. Henry Tudor's about to board the ship. Richard's time's nearly up.
Nearly gone.
Spoiler alerts.
Nearly gone. So so that's next week, and we should mention, if anyone wants to support us on Instagram. No, not on Instagram. Sorry, everywhere. But the links on Instagram. You can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/had podcast, which we would be grateful for. It keeps us in
coffee,
except for you. Do you drink coffee as well? Do you drink coffee, Catherine? No.
For Christ's sake.
Very, very occasionally.
What do you do for fun?
I don't understand.
What are
Sex,
you?
drugs and
You
rock
say
and
squash.
roll.
Do you drink squash?
I do drink
Is
squash.
that what you drink?
And,
See,
do you drink Ribena?
No, I don't like Ribena. And
Of
it
course
rots
you
your
don't.
teeth. My dad was a dentist. So, I was brought up to not touch Ribena. It is the work of Beelzebub. To dentists.
But you weren't brought up drinking tea and coffee, so I'm not quite sure where.
Well, why would you give small
Go with
children
that.
scalding liquids?
It's fun.
I
don't know.
had
You don't give them scolding.
You wait for it to cool down. I had milky tea in a bloody sippy cup. Like it
Well,
had a
I don't
spout.
know. I just don't like tea. Christ almighty. I didn't realise it was that important.
Claire, get Australians to make you one. We have the best coffee. That is the way, the truth, and the life. Australian coffee and New Zealand coffee is chef's kiss delightful. I agree.
Oh,
I agree.
Okay.
fabulous.
Okay, so if you go
Yeah.
to our link tree, you can also find where we are and things we do, and you can join our Substack as well.
Yes.
Well remembered.
Well done.
Well remembered.
I know, good times. There will be many exciting things. So as Had is growing, which it is, there will be more and more bits of exciting things and information stuff.
Oh, hang on. One last question. Mayfair Witch, what can we expect from Gareth Russell? Should we behave ourselves? No.
Oh no.
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 He is like us.
He's
one of us. He might hide it, but not well. He's one of us.
One of us.
He's one of
One of
us.
us. One of
One
us.
of us. Yes. I had tea, at least I had tea in a sippy cup too. Well, clearly, my kids don't like tea. This is not because I have not given them tea, incidentally, because their fathers both like tea. So this is nothing to do with me. He's an enabler. Right. Right. I think that's covered it. You can also follow us over on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, you can follow us on Instagram.
Yeah.
On YouTube, it's History After Dark. On Instagram, it's history.after.dark. You can also follow all of us individually on our various assorted platforms. So I am not just a Tudor tracker. Kat is Katrina.Marchant on Instagram and Reading the Past on the other thing, YouTube.
YouTubes.
And Philippa is British History Talks.
And Philippa and I are also on TikTok as well. Find us on TikTok.
Oh God! Right,
I need to get a bit more active. I was doing well, and then I just stopped.
Also, should you need any work done as in the historical field from a personal or virtual assistant, you can also find me on Facebook as the historical collaborator. Might as well throw that in as I'm here.
Do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we
So-
should say, because we're all involved in the Stuart Summit this weekend as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you
yes. Oh my God, yeah, that's this weekend.
That's this
I
weekend.
can't believe it.
Some
Can't
tickets to
believe
go.
it.
Buy tickets.
Yeah. Buy your
Buy
tickets,
tickets, yeah.
because they go on sale until 7 o'clock tomorrow. The event starts at 8 o'clock tomorrow. This is all London time. And
Thursday. Oh, it's Thursday. It's Friday.
oh God, Friday. Sorry. God, yeah.
Shh, nobody hear that.
Friday at
I
7
said it
p.m.
behind my
That's when
hand.
the tickets
Yes.
are on sale until. Sorry. Yes. And Kat's giving a talk, and as well as Gareth, actually, Tracy Borman, Antonia Keeney, Leander Delisle, Illyri Lynn, Julian Humphreys.
Is that
I
everybody?
managed to get everybody in there, I think. So many people that you will
Many
all
people.
already know.
And a
So,
quiz, and a live quiz.
And a live quiz, yes.
And an
Yes.
author panel.
Bring a bottle and nibbles on Sunday night, and we're going to have a bit of a quiz. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
I've tried to make a mixture of questions of like fairly easy bit in the middle, and you have to have watched it 9 times in order to maybe get it right.
Paige, it's online. Yes, so it's all online. So no matter where you're in the world, you can join in. Time dependent.
Yeah.
Depending on what your time zone is, it may be more or less annoying for you to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, more or less irritating. It starts 8 p.m. Marie, so 8 p.m. on Friday. But all the talks and everything will be available until the end of January. So if you can't make it, as they go live, it you can catch up later. It's fine.
Cool.
So
Fabulous.
yeah.
Right now,
I have one thing to plug. One other thing to plug. So I was on TV on Sunday.
She was.
I was on the telly box. I was on the BBC as well. They let me on. BBC Two.
Standards are slipping, aren't they, at the BBC?
They are. They let me through. They let me through the doors without being like, "You are a vulgar little shit. Fuck off." But we did. I was a contributor to a documentary on the history of Covent Garden, and it's available on the iPlayer. I believe if you happen to be in a nation which does not allow access to the iPlayer, I would never condone it. But some virtual proxy networks, VPNs, may be of assistance to you. But yeah, I'm talking about a particular doctor and how he engaged in life in Covent Garden. There's loads of history across the hundreds of years that there's been stuff happening on that site. So Raven, it's not on YouTube unless somebody's ripped it, but it's currently just on BBC iPlayer.
So there we go. That's extra famous this week.
Just
She's famous with a bit more famous.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
This is what I'm going to say right now. So obviously I know how to end on Instagram. Are we going to try and coordinate so all these things end at the session? It's great when everything finishes at the same time.
So
sorry,
just banged in the thing there. Stuart Summit 2022 at eventbrite.co.uk. Check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to also try and we're going to try and finish together, Catherine.
That's the dream, isn't it? That's what we always say we want.
On that note, everybody.
Okay, are we going to do a countdown?
3.
No, that takes the romance out of it, doesn't it? Okay.
Takes the romance out of it.